Dear colleagues, I hope that you have recovered your energy after the coffee break for the third and the closing session of today's open meetings. And before we start work, I would like to get your attention to a little material put on your table. If you open it, you will see a nice family photo in there for sweet memories. So after fruitful debate on the digital transformation of the industry, we are now going to discuss the main issues related to digital entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial environment. Digital entrepreneurship faces a variety of challenges, and some of which are regulatory in nature, while others relate to issues such as access to appropriate finance, technology and infrastructure, and the availability of applicable knowledge and skills, those things that we have already been talking so much today. And therefore the EU and member states all have a role to play to ensure that EU's digital entrepreneurs have the right environment to grow, to compete and also to expand, both in the EU and internationally. Dear colleagues, during our previous meetings of the Presidency, as well as the Competitiveness Council on the 2nd of March this year, we have usefully debated some of these issues with member states identifying precise challenges where bolder actions is needed. For example, unified domain name registration throughout the EU, technological bottlenecks created by new protocols, including a possible shortage of IP addresses, and necessary support in the field of venture capital for seed and pre-seed stages were already mentioned and focused. And before we begin, I would like to thank once again and express my sincere gratitude to our keynote speakers that have kindly accepted our invitation to join the panel. And we would start with one of the first keynote speakers, the Dutch Minister for Economic Affairs, Mr. Henk Kamp. The Netherlands has done a good work in the field of smart industry and in fostering a startup ecosystem, and I will not delay. Mr. Kamp, the floor is yours.
Madam Chair, 10 years ago I was here in Latvia in Riga as Minister of Defense, and I've noticed that a lot of things changed here in your country since then. Latvia is doing very well, and I think the preparation and the organization of this European meeting illustrates that very well. Thank you very much for the quality of your work. And then on the digital entrepreneurship, ICT increases labor productivity and creates jobs and fosters social innovation. And improving the digital single market can boost our European GDP by 2% over the 5 years up to 2020. So it should be at the forefront of our minds, and I'm very grateful to the Latvian presidency for putting digital enterprise on the agenda. You made a choice, and it was a good choice. The Netherlands is in a strong position to seize the opportunities that ICT offers with an outstanding internet infrastructure and the world's biggest internet exchange point in Amsterdam. The Netherlands is one of the most digital economies and societies in Europe, with many online retailers, innovative startups and globally renowned ICT firms like ASML and NXP and TomTom and Booking.com. But harnessing the economic potential of ICT also poses challenges. A more digital economy puts pressure on traditional business operations, on conventional professions and on long-standing economic and social values. Established businesses face competitors that use new revenue models, like the taxi industry. It's up in arms against Uber, which has a new way of getting customers and a new way of setting fares. And our job as governments is to draw up modern legislation at home and in Europe that gives new businesses, new technologies and new revenue models the space they need. Often they don't fall within existing industrial sectors or regulatory frameworks. For example, more and more firms are combining production with service delivery. Mr. Beijer told us this morning already. And supply and demand can be generated quite differently on online platforms than in physical markets. And these trends need not undermine social interests like privacy, a good enterprise climate and consumer protection. But we have to think of ways to protect those interests without automatically creating comprehensive new rules or sticking rigidly to the old ones. And this question will become increasingly pressing for all of us in the future because American internet companies owe their incredible success in part to the fact that they could expand quickly and freely in their own large domestic market. And with its 28 countries, the EU is losing momentum in the digitization of its economies. This is due to low growth in recent years, but also to restrictive legislation in 28 individual legal systems. And over the past 2 years, Europe has fallen further behind the rest of the world. That's very sad. The Dutch government is doing all it can to stimulate the growth of the digital economy. And to this end, we are working with businesses and research institutions. And thanks to this partnership, we can help businesses launch new ICT applications. More and more companies are speeding up and simplifying their processes by smart links between data and machines. ICT in the Netherlands is now part and parcel of all sectors of our economy. And the government too is digitizing its services to businesses. The Netherlands is also putting a lot of effort into training ICT specialists because our economy needs them very bad. It's important for all member states to have a sound policy for digitization of our economies and to draft future-proof legislation. And we should deal together in Brussels with things that are better dealt with at a European level. An issue that deserves particular attention is net neutrality. In the Netherlands, there's a law on net neutrality. That means internet neutrality. And that law doesn't regulate specialized services that need a guaranteed and enhanced quality and own capacity, like health, national defense and traffic security systems. You can organize everything you want to organize in the Netherlands with regards to these things. Our law guarantees equal treatment and no price discrimination on the open, on the best effort internet. And we think EU should do the same. Perhaps that's not most profitable for the short term for the telecom providers, but it's the best for our economy, it's the best for the digital market, and it's the best for our businesses and our citizens. Net neutrality is needed to realize the 2% GDP growth. We think that Europe will benefit immensely from an ambitious digital single market package. Because the easier it is for our companies to operate in a digital single market, the more they will be able to compete globally. And one of the things we should focus on in the DSM package is removing obstacles to cross-border e-commerce. There's a lot to be gained here. My British colleague said it yesterday already. The Netherlands advocates assessing whether all new EU legislation and rules are digital-proof. At present, the playing field is tilted against innovative products and services in Europe compared with conventional ones. A high rate of VAT is charged on e-books, but a low rate is charged on conventional books. It's a clear example. Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, boosting the digital single market is one of the priority themes of the Netherlands in Europe. We want legislation that serves economic growth, competition and innovation. And that will be our aim in the 5 years ahead to 2020, and we will do our best to realize those goals during our EU presidency after Luxembourg in the first half of 2016. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kamp, for a very promising and inspiring introduction for this working session. And now we'll continue with Ms. Johnson, the President of the European Business Angel Network. I understand that Ms. Johnson is also a member of numerous advisory boards for European and US ventures, and furthermore, she is a member of the board in several universities internationally and specializes also in satellites and telecommunications. So a wide spectrum of knowledge, Ms. Johnson. So the floor is yours. We are looking forward to your experience and advice.
Well, thank you so much, Madam Chair and Mr. and Madams Ministers and delegates. It's a great, great honor to be here with you today. I wanted to just speak about actually in two ways, two phases. The first about investing, private investing, and then the second, actually, my life as an entrepreneur and some of the wonderful things that European entrepreneurs are doing in the world. So the European Business Angel Network, we basically have invested about 7.5 billion euros in Europe in the last year. Private investing, private investors, we think is the key to growth for Europe. And my father was the founder of the Israeli venture capital community. And he always said, a nation is not a nation until they invest in their own next generation. And so it is my goal as president of the European Business Angel Network to make certain that we in Europe become a nation of investors. And it's interesting, you know, I am a telecoms person, so I always like to say, though, that telecoms is dead, long live telecoms. And I think it's the same thing about digital as well. Digital is an enabler. You never, ever want to get stuck up on technology. It is an enabler, and it is enabling everything in our world today. And so even though you can see that here we are investing, and certainly ICT is the largest sector, basically all of the other sectors are enabled by digital and by telecoms. And this is also, you know, this is just private investment, private sector investment, and mostly private individual investment. One thing that we've noticed, and I'm sure, you know, we're all talking here about growth, is the need to have jobs. And so what we have seen is that when an angel investor, a business angel invests, that the employment triples after the investment. So people have the opportunity to hire new people and to create new jobs. Obviously, you know, I was in telecoms, and I was in Germany, and we have our nice gentleman here from Germany. I was in Germany with Dr. Schwarz-Schilling, who was known as the deregulation telecoms minister. This is in the 1980s and 90s. And, you know, every once in a while he would call me up. And I said, Dr. Schwarz-Schilling, why are you calling me? You're the minister, and I'm just me. And he said, Frau Johnson, he said, governments can set policy. Governments can deregulate, but governments cannot do, and I need you to do. And from that day on, it was very clear to me that yes, governments have a responsibility, but entrepreneurs have a responsibility too. We have to make certain that the governments who are putting in place frameworks for us, that we are fulfilling our responsibility to do. As a result of that, when I became president of IBAN, which was about 9 months ago, I said, you know, why should we wait for the governments to do everything for us? We should create our own e-zone. And so when President Juncker announced his goal of an investment plan, I said, all right, but we have to help him. We, the private sector, have to come together, and we have to say, we will bring our own money if the framework is correct. And so we have thought of creating this e-zone, e-Europe, e-excellence, e-entrepreneur, you name it, for Europe's innovators, entrepreneurs, and investors. And, you know, it is basically, obviously, the you know, the dream world of every entrepreneur and every investor, and it incorporates the best practices of a lot of the countries here in around the table. And I would like to also say that it's very nice that that I'm speaking after the Dutch minister, because we will be having our annual Congress in the Startup Delta, which is now the Netherlands, in a few weeks from now, in May. So now, one thing you could say, okay, you know, how in the world are you going to create an e-zone? You know, you are just a private sector, and we got the crowdfunders together, we got the venture capitalists together, we got the stock exchanges together, and we put together this paper, and we said, this is what it is, and we gave it to President Juncker. Well, you know what? I'm a satellite person. And so I take the big picture. And I was very fortunate to be, you know, we've been talking a lot about women here, and I'm very happy to say that, you know, there are always a lot of fathers, but there are usually very few mothers. And so there are a lot of fathers of the Astra satellite system, but I am the only mother. So, and, you know, the thing that is important here is when you do satellites, you say, okay, we're going to create a zone. We're going to create a zone of freedom of choice. When we were doing Astra, we're going to create, we don't have any boundaries. We have a single market, and we will be able to have scale. And that is what we did. And so I'm convinced that we can create this e-zone. And, you know, risk. Everybody talks about risk. But the gentleman, let me see, yes, on the left-hand side, Count de Kergolay, he was our first business angel. Nobody believed in 1983 that Luxembourg could launch a satellite, a private satellite, for Europe. He believed. He put in the first €1 million. And the government of Luxembourg believed. They took a huge risk. In that picture, yes, there is the one mother, but there are all of the fathers, and there is our President Grand Duke of Luxembourg and our former Prime Minister. And that government believed, and they gave a tax holiday of 10 years to this little startup, because Astra was a startup. Astra is today the world's largest satellite system, the most profitable satellite system in the world, because we not only believed, we made certain that we could do everything we could to make it be a success. And this is what we have to tell our entrepreneurs here in Europe. We have to say, think global from day one. When my dad was starting the Israeli companies, he said, you've got to have a headquarters in Israel, one in Europe, and one in the United States. If he were alive today, he would say you'd need to have it in Israel, China, and India, and Europe, of course. So I want to, but you know, so many people talk about the negative things. I want to talk about the positive things here in Europe. And just to show you, this is the young ladies there are holding Raspberry Pi. Now, Raspberry Pi is the $25 computer that has been started by our Cambridge friends, Herman Hauser, who started Arm Holding, and Jack Lang. It is now going around the world. We should be proud of this. And it is helping young people learn how to code and to program by having a $25 computer. And here, with this picture, you know what? I invested 2,500 euros to get the programming software, the middleware, to get it put into Arabic and to be sent to Lebanon. That is the Lebanese telecoms minister talking with the Lebanese education minister. As a result of having a Raspberry Pi that young kids could use to learn how to code and program in Arabic, they put it into all of the schools in Lebanon, and also they're now doing it with UNICEF into the Syrian refugee camps. So we also talked about women. Here, so that was born in Europe, Raspberry Pi. Born in Europe is also the European School Business School Women on Boards Initiative. We started that here in Europe. The Commission was amazing in saying women need to be on boards. As a result, that has now become also a global initiative. So always think global. This is in the Pacific. It is a satellite system that is using Ka-band technology that was built here. And I would like to make a special recognition to the gentleman from Dassault. Because here in Europe, if we are missing something in terms of our entrepreneurial and investment, it is the corporations. I call it the missing link. Corporations like the woman from France said, they need to become more acquisitive. They need to buy companies, and they need to buy startups, and they need to buy services and products from startups. And I am going to, hopefully, just really talking about enabling digital can help us save lives with the climate change. Very, very important. So we must do that. And, you know, I'll leave you with this. There is a new technology coming out for satellites, and lasers. I am an infrastructure person, which of course is enabling the whole digital world revolution to happen. It was born here in Europe. Laser going from the ground to the satellite and back. We could become, here in Europe, we could make our own fully integrated IP backbone network to serve the world. All of the places that are not connected by fiber optics, but could be connected by a hybrid satellite and fiber with technology born in Europe. And we could even provide infrastructure for Google and Facebook, who are doing these new loons, etc. So, as I said earlier, there's a lot of digital technology that is doing health, that is doing climate, etc. But you know what? We need to now tell the world that Europe is open for business, and that these are my ABCs of realizing your dreams. If it's A, avoid negative thoughts. If it's B, believe in yourself. If it's D, don't give up and don't give in. Or if it's Z, zero in on your target and go for it. And we've got to start celebrating. So I'll just finish our nice musical interlude from last night and just say, celebrate, celebrate. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I think the big challenge is that a lot of technologies are given a birth in Europe, but now they somehow move to the United States, for example, and we would be much more happier if the technologies would also live long and prosper here in Europe.
That is why we need to create the E-zone for investment, and we will.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. And now I'd like to give the floor to our colleague from France, Axel. The floor is yours.
Thank you for giving me the floor. I'm not sure I'm going to use it to sing, because otherwise it's going to start raining and I'll leave running. But j'aimerais...
On the basis of what has already been said, I'd like to insist on the actions that we are trying to implement in France and that we'd also like to implement at European level on the basis of the current situation. Since I've taken over digital issues in France, there's a number of ideas we've had. The problem is also in terms of startups that are being lost way more than in other sectors. I talk to people from the sector who tell me that sometimes they don't know what to do. Disruption, for example, that Uber was for taxi drivers. But I could also refer to other sectors: marketing, real estate agencies, heavy industry. So the potential for disruption of the digital economy is enormous. And there's also a second issue: companies which can bring about this disruption are more often than not neither French nor European. And they normally start in the Silicon Valley. And startups have difficulties in growing in our countries. It's not like we have no ideas or we lack the skills. But unfortunately, they are defenseless against two obstacles. First of all, access to the markets, which was discussed in the previous session. And that's why we need the DSM. And maybe we need to push we need to insist on providing facilitation for innovative companies. So this is the problem of access to the markets, but there's another problem, which is access to funding. Indeed, the Silicon Valley has an enormous potential for attraction because of the many investors that can financially support startups. but it's also because of the way funding is structured, at least in France, because it's based today on bank loans. 70% of businesses fund through mortgage loans, whereas in the US it's exactly the opposite. And after the financial crisis, banks need to meet stringent requirements, so they are also extremely cautious in taking risks, and therefore are reluctant in funding innovative business models, because more often than not these startups are not able to describe exactly what their roadmap is for the following 5 years. So the dialogue between startups and banks is rather complex. And we need to try and change the situation and increase private investment in startups in Europe, so that these companies on which we have already invested through education, public funding, tax rebates, etc., do not leave without any return on the economies of our countries. And this concerns all geographical areas, but it's not just Europe. Latin America has exactly the same problems we do. In France, we've tried working on the whole chain of the whole funding chain. Of course, reference was made to crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is now more flexible. Access has been made easier. We have also supported the creation of business NGOs, and we have more favorable rules. We have thought about tax rebates to make sure that large companies start supporting startups with new business models in the framework of business, so that companies do not just invent financially, but also create a sort of incubator in which they invest in startups. And we're talking about the luxury industry or or other forms of industry where these ideas can be rather interesting. We want to attract more venture capitals also, because today there is this €1 million barrier, but if you need to go beyond the €1 million barrier, but you're looking for €5 million, well, then that's where the problems start appearing. And that's sometimes where you need to go to have a critical mass and to conquer foreign markets abroad. In the digital world, for example, it is impossible to become a scale-up company if you don't have an immediate international presence. We also created a dedicated area at the Paris Stock Exchange. BPI, the Public Investment Bank, is providing loans to innovative companies and accepts this cultural revolution, as it were, of including in its analyses also the non-technological innovation. Technological research and development is something which has always been supported. We have high-class engineering in our country, which is recognized. But today, with digital innovation, we also need to be able to support non-technological innovation. And this is possible now with our Public Investment Bank. And it has created an investment fund called French Tech, which does not invest directly in startups, but in so-called accelerators with private investors who themselves invest in startups. And within the framework of this French Tech, we have selected the accelerators which have the highest potential. And then there is also a tax rebate which is provided for those who have research, so that we can support innovation. So We really need to work on diversifying access to credit in France, and we believe this would be a good idea to implement these ideas also at European level. You remember the internet bubble at the beginning of the 2000s, so we need to avoid, of course, this phenomenon, and we need to ask ourselves exactly how funding can be provided to these companies. We need sound investment, reasonable investment, to provide value to these startup companies. And the French government, always in terms of investment, would like the Juncker plan to also envisage a number of funding tools which would allow us to create legal entities which would then associate a number of investment funds so that we can invest at pan-European level. So investors, of course, need to take more risks. If we want to develop entrepreneurship, clearly entrepreneurs need to take more risks. And we need to make sure that qualified workers are also interested and participated in the activities of these more creative enterprises. Apparently, on the basis of the statistics, France is the country where is the highest number of startups. But then there is a problem in terms of sustainability, the actual lifespan of these startups. So we have created a system by which we provide support to startups, because employees working for these startups can count on a number of measures in their favor, because sometimes it's difficult for these new startups to attract qualified, skilled workers. When we talk about entrepreneurship, we also need to see how public powers can accompany the development of these companies. And the French government is now implementing an extremely offensive policy in terms of open government, in simplifying all the procedures companies need to go through. We're building a new platform, single portal, providing services through all public services. We've got this so-called say it once declaration, i.e. once a company provides the information on tax issues, social security, etc., it is then this information needs only to be provided once, and all ministries have access to that information. Then how can their concerns be heard, is this question. Well, our reply is to base ourselves on entrepreneurs and the ecosystem they create, so that they can make their voices heard. And French tech is exactly this, to provide a label which can unite entrepreneurs from all sectors who were not used to talking to public institutions, who were not used to talking to mayors, to local representatives, regional representatives, making sure they now do that. Once they acquire this visibility, they can act, and believe you me, they are strong enough to make their voices heard. And now there are many public representatives who go and visit these industrial clusters which belong to our label, and provide any possible support for these projects. These ecosystems, these innovation ecosystems we've created in France, we believe would be a good idea if they were also created at European level. And we need a stronger cooperation between the various startup clusters. Another possible answer to improve entrepreneurship is education, of course. We must not only create a generation of entrepreneurs, but we also need to educate young people so that they're able to be fully autonomous within the digital world and acquire the necessary skills. This is the ace up our sleeve. We need to improve human skills, human resources, and we've launched a new plan on e-education. And as of 2016, there will be mandatory classes and credits in this e-education. And we will also try to support those who have difficulty in accessing these programs. And there's also another issue, which is immigration, because international competition is also based on the ability to attract the most talented workforce, especially because people with these skills are more and more difficult to acquire. And if Europe were able to open up for skilled workers, this would make life easier also for those who have new startups. Thank you.
Thank you, Axel. One can really see that you have a vast practical experience, and thank you for sharing with it. But now I'd like to give the floor to Ernest Jernaus, who is one of the keynote speakers coming from the private sector. Usually we say that there are skills needed to explore the digital world, but he is the one that has created a company and a product that uses the digital environment for improving the skills. The company Edurio has created a product which is also called Edurio, and that is an online tool that helps schools assess the quality of the education provided and to identify possible areas of improvement. Ernest, we would be happy to hear you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen. So half a year ago, I founded a company trying to help education institutions change the way they think about quality through collecting feedback and carrying out self-assessment in a digital form. Right? But prior to that, I came from consulting, where I've worked with large corporates on innovation. So I've sort of had the shift into entrepreneurship. And first, I'd like to just say there's a bit of a problem when we talk about digital entrepreneurship, and this is something Ms. Johnson touched upon, is that I never introduce Edurio as a digital enterprise or a tech enterprise. It's an education enterprise. It's a bit like a book publisher or newspaper producer saying, well, we're in the paper business. Tech is the enabler, and so what we're talking about here is removing roadblocks such that the digital enterprises can prosper. But what I would say is, when we talk about enterprise support, let's not talk about digital enterprise support. Let's talk about enterprise support in a digital age. And so digital enterprises is a bit of a new beast, and so I think there are three differences that we need to look at as we think about how we help enterprises grow in the digital age. And first, a digital enterprise is always born global, or a good one is, because all the capital, all the investment is in the building cost. There's a lot less direct cost, so the way you make it profitable and globally and really bring the best return is you scale it as quickly as you can and as globally as you can. The second is digital enterprises tend to innovate differently. They will have constant development cycles, minimum value products, multiple launches, and developing constantly. It's not where you develop a product and then you try and distribute it. And digital enterprises fundraise differently. Again, they're working from round to round, demonstrating traction as they go along, but the funding is to scale up, to scale globally. And so with that in mind, I have two things I, as an entrepreneur, would like to request you to work on, which is to removing the biggest roadblocks I think entrepreneurs face in the current age. And it's not the VAT, it is not the administrative burden, important as they are. I think there's been a lot of work done on the digital single market when we talk about trade and we talk about products. What we need in Europe is a single market for investors. And I'd say that when we look at the investment space, protectionism is where it was for trade 20 years ago. So as a startup, as an entrepreneur, if I want to attract investment from within Europe, I need to immediately start thinking about where I could relocate, where I could reincorporate, because that is where a lot of the programs, individual state support programs, request startups and entrepreneurs to relocate. And not only within a European level, that's putting growth potential from one pocket to another, it is also hindering the entrepreneurs, and they have to be thinking about regulatory changes and administrative setting up new entities and things like that, which is preventing them from focusing on the important thing, which is scaling globally. And the second thing I'd like to touch upon is the enterprise support schemes. So I'm also an evaluator for the Horizon 2020 program, the Small Medium Enterprise Instrument. And having gone through the evaluator briefing and having now seen dozens of submissions of innovation ideas, Horizon 2020 is fundamentally unfit for the digital enterprise. There's a lot of focus on IP, there's a lot of focus on technological readiness, more so than traction, which is how digital enterprises grow. And so Horizon 2020 is very good for supporting inventions, but not necessarily innovations as a digital enterprise would see it. And obviously, the problem with supporting inventions is that if you do happen to have a very successful one, then it needs a lot of follow-up funding. So Tesla Motors pre-IPO raised over $200 million in equity funding and over $400 million in debt. And well, you can all guess where a startup would go for that kind of money. It's not Europe. And so if we were to set up an enterprise support scheme fit for the digital age, it would look at the potential impact, the team that's going to deliver it, and traction. That is the most important thing as you support a digital enterprise in scaling up. So yeah, in conclusion, I'd say if you look at why entrepreneurs are leaving the EU, it's not the VAT, it's not the admin burden, it is because the funding and the support does not enable global scaling. So I'd call on you to focus on building a single investor market and an entrepreneur support scheme that's fit for the digital age. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Janaus. Access to finance, the key word in your message. Our next speaker is Mr. John Higgins, who is the Director General at Digital Europe, a leading organization representing digital technology industry in Europe. He's also a president of the Strategic Policy Forum on Digital Entrepreneurship set up by the Commission last year.
Well, thank you very much, Minister, Madam President. Thank you. It's a great pleasure also to have the opportunity to speak to you all. I thought I would try to cover 3 points in my short intervention. First of all, to give you my view on what digital entrepreneurship is, although to some extent, Ernst, you've stolen my thunder there, described it very well. I want to try and make the link between digital entrepreneurship and digital transformation of industry and enterprises, the topic that we discussed in the last session. And then I want to draw some conclusions from the policy forum that you referred to, that I had the privilege to lead for the last year. But first, a little about me, only so you know where I'm coming from. I too have run a tech startup in California and New Mexico and London before I switched for the much more exciting world of European policymaking. I've spent actually most of my career involved in the application of digital technologies to a wide range of sectors, from British manufacturing to Australian public sector, all sorts of applications of digital technologies over many years. And today the organisation that I run, Digital Europe, is the European grouping of national associations of tech companies we don't count 20 million members, but I think we get to about 24,000 members in our network. And although I haven't spoken to them all, I've spoken, I think, to enough to have a very good sense of the sorts of issues that concern them. And a little bit about the Strategic Policy Forum on Digital Entrepreneurship, because I'm going to refer to that. It was a body set up by the European Commission about a year ago by what was then DG Enterprises, now DG Growth. And it brought together a very wide range of stakeholders, from people in the public sector to trade unions, to people in industries that were being affected by digital transformation, and also some of my own members, companies that were involved in the supply of technologies and services. And a very rich forum of people, a very broad range of views, and I hope that the reports that we will both send you afterwards, but if you're keen, you will find a few copies of on the table at the back for those that like a piece of paper to read on the plane. Do take one. So a very rich report. So to those three things, what do I think of by digital entrepreneurship? Well, when we think of entrepreneurship, it brings to mind things like leadership, innovation, as you referred to, Ernest, a healthy appetite for risk and reward. And when I talked to groups of entrepreneurs about, well, what does digital mean to you? What's the difference? What difference does digital make to an entrepreneurial mindset? It's almost exactly the things that you said. I would have summed it up as scale immediately, but reach in the sense of the reach of people that I can draw on in order to build my business, but also speed. Speed in innovation of new products, but speed to fail with ideas quickly. So to my mind, it's like if entrepreneurship was a Skoda, then digital entrepreneurship is like a BMW. So, you know, it really just does the same thing, but much faster. I want to give you an example that maybe, although you've presented us with a very good example there, but a woman I met in Brussels a few months ago, Patricia Cusden, and she had retired and was a bit bored at the age of 65. She wasn't sure what she wanted to do, so she decided she wanted to set up a business. And she'd found that she couldn't find any cosmetics that she felt suited a woman of her age, she felt. So she reached out to some cosmetics manufacturers, and she found some formulations, and she was about to build this business by setting up a local shop and maybe having a network, when her daughter persuaded her that she really ought to make this a digital business. And when I met her, this was 2 or 3 years after she'd set it up, she told the story of how digital had completely transformed the business idea that she had. I mean, you can go and find her videos on YouTube, and it's probably actually the only thing that you can take away from a competitiveness council, that when you speak to your mother on Sunday, you've got something she'll be really interested to know about. It's called Look Fabulous Forever. I definitely urge you to go and look at it. And another takeaway, I think, from Patricia's story is digital entrepreneurs don't have to be young. We often link that idea that they're young, but they're not always in every case. She does look stunningly young, I agree, but I think she would be the first to say she's not. So let me move to the second point, the link to digital transformation of industry and enterprises. So in our policy forum, we very quickly decided that we wanted to focus on the transformation of industry and enterprises. And we didn't just mean manufacturing industries, we meant the whole of the European economic fabric, if you will, including social enterprises, because we discovered that social enterprises are making an increasing contribution to European economy. Why did we do that? Well, I'm minded of Willie Sutton, an American bank robber, maybe not the sort of American bank robber that you would normally talk about in these fora, but he was an American bank robber who allegedly, when asked why he robbed banks, said, well, that's where the money is. And we had a similar view, in a sense, of our work. We said, well, why shall we focus on digital transformation And it was because we were persuaded that that's where most of the value of digital was for Europe. And in fact, our research tells us that 3/4 of the value of digital for Europe is in the transformation of its existing industries and enterprises. And we also found that the ideas that we came up with to further this also had application for businesses like yours, Ernest, and businesses like Patricia's. So there was not an awful lot different between the transformation ideas and what you needed to do to encourage younger or older entrepreneurs to start up and scale up as well. And indeed, as we were also understood, as Marcus said earlier, that it's a bit of a make or break time for European industry. We were very heartened that we saw many examples of digital transformation, successful digital transformation, and not always in the areas that immediately spring to mind. So Look Fabulous Forever might be one example, but we also saw an Italian furniture maker, an SME in northern Italy, who'd transformed their business using digital tools and were now successfully selling high-quality furniture over the whole world. And we also heard examples of bigger companies like Bertelsmann, for instance, who told us about their digital journey, their digital transformation. So we saw many examples, not just in the sort of obvious areas that you might expect. I won't go through the recommendations, obviously, but the report's there for you to read. They fall into four areas, and you've heard things drawn from those 4 areas already of leadership, of trust, of skills, and of regulation. I won't go through those, but I will conclude just with 3 points. The first, I think, is a very serious point that we have all promised, and I include the digital industry in this, we have all promised European citizens that digital will deliver jobs and growth. And it seems to us that if 75% of the value of digital is in the transformation of our existing economy, then it must be a high priority for our digital program, which we're now calling the Digital Single Market. So it's really important that if we are to deliver on our promise, we include a strong focus on digital transformation of part of our digital efforts in this new Commission program. I also think that there's something about clarity and focus would be my second point. One of the things we were privileged to have as part of this forum was a member states board. And it was very interesting, the people that the member states sent to this exercise. Some sent people from the industry department, some sent people from research, some sent people from tech and telecoms, some sent people from startup support. So everybody had a different idea of what digital entrepreneurship meant. And I think it can mean all of those things, but it would be very good if we focused our more effort on digital entrepreneurship within the digital transformation of industry and enterprises, partly because that's where the big prize is, but also partly because I think there's already a lot of focus on, brilliant focus, if I may say so, on tech startups, and there's a lot to do there. I'm not suggesting at all taking the foot off the gas, but we do need to focus on this other area as well. We did steal unashamedly from this Member States board, and some of the great ideas, French tech, the digital test, great ideas from Digital Dublin. We tried to gather in all the best examples from Europe. The third thing I want to finish on is on skills, just a brief mention on skills. When we asked our members in Digital Europe, what sort of measures do you think would be most likely to deliver a Europe that has a great tech sector and takes full advantage of tech for its economy and society? And we gave them a list of 20 or so things, prioritise and rank these. And the one that came out top was improve the quality and quantity of digital skills. And that actually shouldn't be any surprise to us, because if we look back in history, and you refer, Madam President, in your briefing paper, I think, to a revolution caused by a second wave of digital technologies. If we look back to the Industrial Revolution and think about what happened then, there are a couple of things that are worth noting. One is, not many people remember who created the underlying technology. There aren't many of us who remember actually, we don't rave about having steam engines, although if you go to a museum in Manchester, you'll find a very good museum on steam engines. It's not about the steam engines, it's about who makes best use of them. And I think the same thing could be said here as well. Yes, we need great technology, but we really need to be taking advantage of that technology too. There are those twin tracks that are really important. When Sir Robert Peel, who was the then Prime Minister in 1841 in the UK, looked at what was happening, he recognised that the Industrial Revolution was about to hit the UK, or Great Britain as it was then, and he mused on the fact that although we might prefer that Britain remained a place of cotton fields and not cotton mills, that actually the lot is cast. We can't go back from that. We have to make the best of it, and I think that's what Britain did. And finally, when historians look back and say, well, why did the Industrial Revolution take root in Britain and not, as it could easily have done, in France or in the Netherlands? Why in Britain? And many historians say it was because at that time the level of education and skills in the British population enabled them to take advantage of that technology in a way that the other countries couldn't. I'm not arguing that that's the case today, but I think it's a useful pointer that if we have the skills that can take advantage of those digital technologies, then Europe can prosper from them. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. And now our next panelist is Mr. Taavi Kotka from Estonia, from the Estonian Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communications. Estonia is well known also as the Estonia and the source of many inspiring digital projects like the Tiger Leap. And we also know about the Estonian e-government initiatives, like Estonia became the first country in the world to introduce an e-voting option. And praising the neighbors, I would like to praise also our own country, is the 3 Baltic states have already jointly introduced the interoperable e-signature, which is operational across our borders. Just a little example how the common EU market should work. But now, Taavi, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, a couple of words about myself also. Like Mr. Higgins, I also come from private sector, and I was lucky enough to build up one of the largest software development companies in this region. And I also was lucky enough to earn enough money so I actually can afford working for the government. Yeah. Actually, we have a rule in Estonia. Those people who haven't served their military service, they have to work for the government for a couple of years. So I'm just doing my duty at the moment. So, yeah, I mean, like, we had a couple of slides also. Can I have a remote control? And slides. No slides. Okay, we can do it without that. But yeah, Estonian point of view. I mean, like, we are a small market, only 1.3 million people, and our startup environment is doing good. I mean, like, we have our second unicorn at the moment during 1 decade, so we can be proud that the startup area is very active in Estonia, and all that is connected with digital entrepreneurship, that area is doing good. They have, those companies, they have one common characteristics. They are incorporated in Delaware. So they're working in US market mostly. And it's a simple reason. It's a huge market. Like 300 million people, and I mean, like, it's hassle to enter any market. I mean, like, it's the same kind of hassle to enter like Chinese market to Japanese market, like in US. But with US, you survive the hassle, but then you have 300 million market. There's no market in EU. I mean, like, if I want to enter with a company in EU market, there's no EU market. There's a German market, there's a Spanish market, there's UK market, but there's no EU market. So it's obvious that, like our Latvian entrepreneurs said, that it's much easier to enter US market, and instead of hassling with different markets and administrative functions, you just focus on sales and creating your own product or improving your own products. So, and also what is good with the US market is that, I mean, like, the supporting network. I mean, like, for example, if you want to create the sales, if you want to start sell your products or services all around the US market, and you want to put up a sales organization, it just takes a couple of months, and you are able to sell all over the US. How much time it takes to sell your products or services in EU? I mean, like, to put up a team that is actually able to sell your services stuff all over the EU. So yes, according to the numbers, EU market is bigger than US numbers. But in reality, it's not. It's a small, fragmented market. And it takes too much hassle. It's much easier to go and start with US, and if it's good, and if it works out, and if the company has become rich enough, then it's time to move back to the EU market. EU market is for large companies only, because they have time and they have money to work this market out, to actually reach all those different countries. That's the fact. And that's why it's so wise to go to the US. So that's, I mean, like, that's what we see, and it's a trend. I mean, like, there are not too many Estonian startups or digital companies who actually stay in the EU market. What could be done to change that? I mean, like, I totally, I mean, like, in favor of UK's proposal that it should be easy to establish a company in EU, like with 24 hours, etc. But I think it's more important how to actually be able to reach the whole market, for example, with 6 months. I mean, like, from day one, it took six months to provide services or products all over the EU. That should be the goal. How to do that? What could be changed? What should be changed? We have a huge potential in Europe. I mean, like, we could be. And we have many countries with good examples here in Baltics, in Scandinavia, etc., where countries are able to exchange data and actually, I mean, like, we have been advocating this once-only principle that if the information is given to one country, it should be spread all around Europe if needed. Just, that was the first slide, and the thing that it takes too much time to enter the European market. But that's the picture I'm talking about now. It's, we should be, I mean, like, if a Estonian company goes to Germany, even though it has 20 years record and the credit record is absolutely, like, fantastic, in German market, I'm zero again. I need to start proving that I'm a proper businessman and I have a great product, etc. And when I'm done with German market and I built up a company there, and now I want to move to the Spanish market, for example. Again, ground zero. No credit history, nothing. No loans, nothing. Start again from scratch. This shouldn't be so. I mean, like, if we talk about European market, let's talk European market. Let's not talk about German market, the Spanish market, UK market. Let's talk European market. That needs to be solved. And the data always should come with me. Like, whenever, I mean, like, I just could point out, like, I approach a new market and then they say, I have information about my company history, etc. in Sweden, in Estonia, and other 4 markets. Just look at this data and then decide, am I worth to enter your market or not? So we have been, like, building and enforcing data, machine-readable data exchange in Estonia, like 15 years, and our private sector and public sector are actually using it so heavily that, for example, if somebody approaches Estonia with paper contract, they look at you with suspicion. I mean, like, do you want to trick me? Is there some kind of small print I need to see? I mean, like, do you want to fake a date? They're so used to use digital signatures. They're so used to exchange data automatically and then we really see that it makes us very efficient. And Europe, I mean, like, you have the same tools available. Just let's put all this work together. So our proposal would be like for Europe that like any government institution, like if you collect some kind of information on paper, it has to be always available to present that data in machine-readable way. Or if you give out data on paper, it should be given out also in machine-readable way. So instead of giving me this picture, please give it to me in machine-readable way, like a file. So, yeah, that's one of our proposals. Second thing we would like to point out is data issue. I mean, like our startups and our companies in Europe, maybe we have already missed the boat. I mean, like it's very hard to catch Apple or Google. I mean, like they have so much data and they collect it day by day even more. So whenever, I mean, like Google wants to enter, for example, in a medical area, they have a huge competitive advantage because there is no other company in the world who has the same kind of data sets. And what is the ability of European startups and European small companies to try to fight against this kind of giants? It's impossible. Or there's a chance. In Estonia, we have a solution, one of the solutions, a rule that the data belongs to the citizen. So what it means is that, I mean, like, I'm an Apple user, so I have an Apple phone. And Apple registers my movements after every 30 seconds. So they basically know, like, all my movements. But this data is created by me. So I am the data owner. I move around, and you collect data about me. So it should be, I mean, like, what it means, like, in our terms, if I would like to give this data that I created to the third party, and it's my decision, I should be able to do that. And think, for example, if I would like to help, for example, an Estonian small startup that wants to create some kind of new application or tool, but they need they need data about people's movement. And they are able to motivate, for example, 1,000 persons just around in that particular small town. They are able to motivate those people. And those people actually give their Apple data to that startup. I mean, like, it means that data is still an asset, but it's not a privilege anymore. And that might give at least a small chance to our startups to reduce the gap what we have or the I mean, like, the competitive advantage what those giants have. So let's think about that. I mean, like, the free movement of data. Can this be part of our agenda also? So whenever, if any company collects data about me, I have a right to ask that data out in machine-readable way and pass it to third party. It's my decision if I want to do that. It's my motivation if I want to do that. So that's just one more proposal, how we could reduce the gap with big ones, or how we can catch the boat. And the last thing, I mean, like, we all understand that it's impossible to make European market as the best market in the world without radical changes. I mean, like, radical times needs new type of thinking and radical changes. And I mean, like, in Estonia, we call this kind of behavior innovation through pain. It means that innovation always brings pain to somebody. Just a couple examples. I mean, like, 13 years ago, we wanted to implement a platform between teachers, schools, and students and parents. So we built up a new application, and then we told the teachers that if you don't put grades and topics into the system, you won't get paid. The implementation of the system all around the country took 2 months. So, I mean, like, it was very painful and hard reform, but it's just an example, but that if you want to make a change, like, you need to be tough. I mean, like, we have mandatory national ID cards. That's allowed us to be like we are at the moment. I mean, like, totally digital. That was the enforcement. Or, I mean, like, I can create many similar examples. But here also, I mean, like, it's hard to change your processes and your motivation if you're stuck with old software and the old behavior. I mean, like, so we have introduced in Estonia also those so-called no legacy policy. So there cannot be any application, a government application, that is important and is older than 13 years, 1-3. So we force, even if the application works, we force institutions to rewrite them, because it's the only way how we can push administrations to be innovative. Technology change, people behavior change, cybersecurity change. There are so many excuses why they should like do the new innovation and then rewrite their stuff. And now we force it even by official policy. So, and maybe Europe needs some kind of like additional motivation also, or focus. That let's call a war towards legacy, because that's the only way that we can allow us to start thinking again from scratch in a new way. So, thank you. Quickly, Estonian view. Thank you.
Aite, Taavi. And now we would like to give the floor to Dr. Harald Maarer. They say that you are especially vulnerable one day in a year. I would say, and I would hope that you are especially productive one day in a year, and it's your birthday. Harald and colleagues, it's the Harald's birthday today, and since we say that Latvia is the country that sings, we would like to congratulate you with a very short song. So. Daudz baltu dieniņu laimiņa dodi, diženi raženi strādājoti, diženi raženi strādājoti.
Oh, perfect.
Happy birthday, and now it's your task to speak.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, very kind of you and the whole team. I would also like to thank Taavi for his keynote. I think he touched quite a number of crucial issues. And in the end, we can say to be or not to be for the European digital single market. That's the question. It is rather rare for Europe's elites to converge around the shared vision of the future. But currently I'm observing a distinct sense of alignment, especially in audiences like ours today, that our modern European society is at the start of a new machine age, a revolutionary age, as Markus Bayer from Business Europe has described to us earlier this morning with his call for urgency. But we have already heard many interesting ideas about how to best use this time of fundamental change to Europe's advantage. I would like to broaden the focus of the second question asked by the presidency for this part of the debate a little bit on how can we ensure that digital entrepreneurs are involved not only in designing policies related to the digital single market, but to all relevant policy areas, and how can we unleash their full power, their full potential. I will argue that open innovation is probably the one single answer to this question. And probably the colleagues from the business area, from the startup area, will know what I'm going to speak now. In general, when companies and governments supported by them then formulate policies, the well-connected companies, usually the traditional brick-and-mortar companies, are those that are most closely integrated into the process. This is to a large extent due to their strong and historically grown networks. Yet, the greatest innovation potential is found at the outskirts of social networks, where digital and social entrepreneurs operate. This enormous innovation potential must also be integrated into policymaking by ensuring access for digital entrepreneurs to the very core of the innovation ecosystem in Europe, especially, but not only in those areas that directly affect them. I brought some numbers with me and some charts, only a few ones. First, let me start by asking who are our digital entrepreneurs. Digital entrepreneurs arises from a pool of tech-savvy and skilled people. If you look at the numbers, you see in 2013, 5.2% of the world population were digital natives, a total of 363 million people. By 2018, this number will have doubled. While Europe and the US have a high share of digital natives in relation to the population, in absolute terms, we see a clear dominance of China. And by 2018, China will have reached more than 150 million digital natives. So users really being well aware of what they do when using the internet. And this enormous potential will be further fueled by intensified R&D expenditures. If you look at the next slide, you see that the development over time shows a striking picture, and it should put us on high alert. In 2014, US R&D expenditures reached 465 billion US dollars, compared to Europe's 351 and China's 284. But by 2019, China R&D expenditures will be at the same level as Europe's. And by 2022, China will have reached the same level as the US. So that we all know what's going on. Well, my dear colleagues, in terms of dynamism, Europe does not seem to be able to keep up. The Digital Readiness Index measures countries' rates of digital evolution as well as the speed of advancement. And what we clearly see is a lack of presence of EU countries in the standout area, which you can see in the upper right corner of the chart in front of you. Only Ireland and Estonia, thank you for your speech once again, pointing out all the critical issues, are the lone European Union's representative there. And as the Madam Commissioner said at the end of the last session, we are losing our competitiveness each and every day. So how does this translate into entrepreneurship? It's quite easily translated. Looking at the list of current so-called unicorn companies, these are former high-tech or digital startups now valued at more than $1 billion US or more by venture capital firms. It becomes quite clear that Europe, illustrated in white and labeled with the company name in this figure, is painfully underrepresented. The Worldwide Unicorn Club is presently led by the Chinese smartphone producer Xiaomi, it's the Chinese Apple, and dominated by US firms. So it is Silicon Valley against the Pearl River Delta. For those of you who do not know this area, it's the area between Canton, Shenzhen and Hong Kong in the southernmost of China, where China currently is exporting a lot of its former production plants in the textile industry and the plastic good industry towards Vietnam and Cambodia and mainland China, because there they currently now put all their high-tech investment to establish fully automated robotic plants for the high-tech industry. So why is it that Europe seems to be falling behind? Europe's digital entrepreneurs, many of which are without doubt brilliant, are hampered by a number of restrictions and barriers. Most of the problems we addressed yesterday and today, such as access to finance, access to talents, and heavy regulation, are well known. But what we think is often overlooked, however, is an underlying aspect, which is probably the most important driver and enabler for Europe's future success. I say it is a question of mindset in Europe. Too often we focus too much on the little things that are right in front of us, but forgo the chances that are out there. We are simply ignoring the big picture for Europe, the big picture for one common market. As Markus pointed out today, yeah? Why do we need this big number of small sub-markets in a totally digital area? You also pointed it out quite before, yeah? And even here in this council, we're focusing on small issues, not on the big picture, to be honest. Only if we start opening our minds by asking unconventional questions and shed our elitist pessimism, the lack of belief that we can still win the race that continues to dominate our public debate, only then will we succeed in generating sustainable technological and social innovation. And this, our small-mindedness, is also mirrored in our conventional innovation strategy, which is still comprised of too many isolated and self-centered ecosystems and networks. This does not allow for the necessary extent of free information and innovation transfer. Especially the small, but highly innovative players, our digital and social entrepreneurs, are too often at the outskirts of our innovation networks. Therefore, in parallel to opening our minds, it is also time to open our innovation systems. Applying an open innovation strategy, organizations use internal as well as external ideas and innovate in partnerships with their stakeholders. And digital entrepreneurs, startup community, and their innovations will have the most social and technical impact where they are integrated in a network comprising all relevant stakeholders, including large corporations, academia, government, users, of course, and civil society. By establishing a European open innovation strategy, we probably could succeed in opening mindsets. And this open approach must then be transferred to all relevant areas to lift the many barriers digital entrepreneurs are still facing today and have plainly put on the floor today. What we did in Austria by opening our mind and using open innovation, we're going to use this in all areas of policy making, and currently we have put these principles into action with 2 pilot projects. First, we are currently in the phase of developing a national-wide open innovation strategy, already using the principles of open innovation. We're doing quite some funny, we have quite some funny experience in doing that. Yeah? It's really, for the government side, a very interesting task. And we are currently working on an Austrian Gründerland strategy, which is our own digital startup agenda. And in this process, we have put in place a broad stakeholder dialogue. This way, those most affected by the digital startup agenda, the entrepreneurs and startup itself, were at the core of the policy-making process. We're nearly finished, and we'll put this into place within the next weeks. So let me close by saying, if we agree that digitalization is the big game changer, then it's quite obvious that digital and social entrepreneurs must be put in a better position to participate also in European policy making, not only concerning the digital single market, but all relevant policy fields, as pointed out today. Digitalization is the game changer. And developing and implementing an extensive open innovation strategy at the European level will enable digital and social entrepreneurs to move from the outskirts of the innovative ecosystems to the center. It's a plain fact. I once again want to underline it. Digitalization will change everything we know right now. With an open mindset enabled through open innovation, Europe can be in the position to take a strong international role, to take a strong position in the international playing field and confidently face global competition. Losing this race is not a choice for the people of Europe. It's no choice at all for us. And I'm convinced, and I do believe, that it is in our hands to change the game. And to achieve this, we must boldly go where no man has gone before in Europe. Thank you so much.
Let your wishes come through, especially today, no? The next keynote speaker is Mr. Andris Bērziņš, who is the co-founder of Tech Hub Riga. That is the place where our local innovative startups are given the birth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, many great things have been said, so I'm going to try and strip some things out of what I was going to say to not repeat myself over what others have said. Quick background, so I'm an entrepreneur. For the last 15 years or so, I've worked in tech startups in the US, in Europe, also Israeli-backed startups, so all over the world. And I was inspired to do so, having spent a couple of years at Stanford Business School in the first dot-com boom, actually. And it's been an exciting time in the last few years as things have really changed. So the fact that I'm sitting here and you're listening to me is something that didn't really happen even maybe 5 years ago, because the agenda was different. And so one of the things that I think since I've on and off over the last 20 years dealt with various projects related to the EU, one of the things that I think has changed is that when looking at the impact of EU policy, I think most of the sort of thinking has been around looking at impact on large enterprises, on corporates, and on small, medium businesses. But what was a small, medium business even 5, 10 years ago, the majority of those were single nation businesses, or that produced and sold most everything locally. Maybe they exported, but they really had largely a focus on their national market. And that has really changed, and the word "born global" has been used here again and again. But it's very important to understand that at Tech Hub we run a co-working space here in Riga that you can almost see across the river there, where two guys will sit down at a desk and they will come up with, say, a service that helps brands collect photographs on the web made on the Instagram app and use those to help their marketing efforts, right? So this is an actual startup we have, and the day those two guys sit down at that desk is the day they want to sell globally. But they're just two guys, and those two guys are doing everything. They're coding, they are filing registration for the company, they are sorting out their own taxes, they are doing everything they need to do to run that business. And so from day one, that business is both selling globally and with very small staff. So many of the things that big businesses can do to work across many markets are something which is like a stranglehold for a very small early business. And these businesses, as we keep hearing, are very important for the future, because obviously many of them will not survive or will not grow as big, but some of them will be the large corporations, the large employers that will bring economic growth and lots of value in the future. So it's important to think about what can we do to place the minimum roadblocks in front of those two guys sitting in that co-working space here in Riga, so that they have the maximum chance of being successful. So I think the term making digital-proof laws by Mr. Camp was a very good way of thinking about it. So think about ways of applying policy that will ensure that these two gents at those desks doing coding and everything else will have the maximum chance of success. So a lot has been discussed about investment and doing things to make it easier to attract investment from European investors for these startups, because it is clear, and I do agree with that, that being able to attract investors closer locally will increase the chance that that business will keep the majority of its operations in its home country and will stay there. So obviously they may re-register in Delaware because it's the US is a very big market which you can tackle in a single role. But just like Skype in Estonia has a large development operation in Tallinn still today, the successful businesses that will have grown up and sell globally, you want to encourage them to keep the majority of their operations here. And that's what we see with some of our early success stories, is that even though they may sell globally, they still base their operations here. But they have a tremendous pull from Silicon Valley on the investment side, which was much discussed already. But they also face a lot of small hurdles in terms of being able to efficiently get their business going. And I think one example that I'll give, and it'll be somewhat in the form of a complaint, as it were, from a previous decision. So the VAT rules, which, as Anna's rightly pointed out, are not the reason anyone would move to Silicon Valley, but they are a reason that some startups may fail to get to where they could do, right? So a very simple thing like setting up shop. You create this online Instagram photo sharing service, and now you want to sell it, right? So you want to sell it to the biggest market possible, and in the US, that's pretty straightforward. You connect a credit card payment service, you can sell to the whole US. In Europe, as a result of the rules coming in on January 1st, you have to now register in all the European Union countries where you're selling, because the VAT is now calculated based on the country of the customer rather than the country of the supplier. So even though there is a mini one-stop shop service to try and make this easier, it is definitely an administrative burden. And I think however many years ago, was maybe 6-7 years ago that this decision was originally made, because the thinking was mostly around small companies being national, no one was thinking about the two guys sitting at the desk they're the guys who have to register in 28 countries, or they have to pay money to a tax accountant to sort that out for them, right? So these are, they're not the big blocks that will blow something down, but if you have a whole row of these are things that will decrease the number of successful startups that will turn into those unicorns that we really need. So, so I think one of the things I would just like to encourage is, as you look at the digital single market policies, please think about small, medium businesses in a different way, or in two categories. There's small national businesses, and there's born global startups. And born global startups have a different set of challenges, and you need to think about a different set of support to do that. The good news is that I think the vast majority of those changes you would make to accommodate those born global startups will be good for all small, medium businesses. Right, so things like digital signatures, which the Baltic states have. I have friends who work across all 3 Baltic states, and they all sign all company registration, company filings, tax filings, everything with digital signatures. It's much easier, believe me. Right, so these kind of things can help, the small things can help these businesses be more successful. And I would also, regarding the digital transformation that you mentioned, in some way say I understand the importance of that as a large block, but I also think the reason to focus on digital entrepreneurship is that change is hard. And as my Estonian colleague here said, you know, people don't like change. They hate change, right? So one of the roles of encouraging startups is to push large corporations into changing. And these transformations will happen when someone else is trying to take away their business. So help the small startups that are growing try to take away a big company's business, because that big company will then change, adapt, and become better, more successful, more productive. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anders, for your insight from the startup ecosystem perspective. We will now close our panel session with the final speaker, Oskar Strenström from Sweden's Ministry of Enterprise and Innovation. Oskar, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Donna. My daughter, which is 12 years old, she texted me and asked if we had any time to play a game of chess. And then I can be very fortunate to say that we ran out of time, and everyone is waiting for lunch. So I'm happy that I have a good escape there. So she Googled you, obviously. So thank you very much, Dana, for 2 good days. But I think we rather should see it as 4 good days, because a few of you has been here for 4 days with the Trade Council. And from the Swedish government, we see it as an important link between what we have been talking about here for 2 days and the openness and the trade. Because we're afraid, and we have to avoid protectionism, both within the European Union, but also with the other world. And I think Harald and your figure clearly show that we really have to be connected to the US and to China, and not to isolate ourselves. And we have proposed a digital zone within the TTIP agreement. And I'm also looking forward, as Commissioner Bienkowska has said, that we really have to walk the walk. Now we have done the talking and talking, and we have to sort out the responsibilities, what we do on national states and what we can do on the European state. And that's a clear demand from our voters. And to get the idea, why are we a member of the European Union? What can we expect from the Commission, and what can we expect from me as representing a government and as a local MP? What are the different responsibilities? And I didn't say anything under the digital single market issue, but I mean, I said it before in the council meeting, it's digital by default. We have to abolish the localization and the fragmentation of the VAT. I mean, it's all of these small things that we need to start moving to see it as one market, and not to start again from Sweden to Germany to Spain. And we have all the witnesses here during these days, which is good. We bring it back to our government. It's also good to hear how you are tackling the issue as a new center-left government in Sweden. But I was asked to talk about entrepreneurship, and that's maybe where my daughter is, because she will be crucial for new companies in the future of Europe, for the economy and for the jobs. And the entrepreneurs are really the heroes, taking the innovations, as John said, from the research to the market, and that's how we can spread the ideas and get the use of it as human beings to enjoy a better life for all. And to foster entrepreneurship, we need to start at the beginning. There are no shortcuts. It's about the skills, and skills is about education. So I need, as a father and mothers, to keep our kids in school, stay in school, and we have to secure that we have good schools in Europe, and that all schools are good, not just a few. So we need to provide them with the abilities and the attributes to make them entrepreneurs. And I do not only mean entrepreneurs in the sense of building companies, but people who can help develop all parts of society and being entrepreneurial, to contribute. And it's obvious, I don't need to repeat that entrepreneurs need to have the digital skills and skills that can help them develop the ideas and business and to reach new markets, global markets. Maybe born global, but maybe also born locally, to test a product before you go global, before you invest in a lot of PR. I've been speaking to two entrepreneurs, not speaking, I was texting and emailing with two female entrepreneurs, which has been widely covered in the Swedish press the 2 weeks. And one of them is called Josefin Landegård, who started a digital healthcare center in Sweden. Her vision is very simple, and that is that every fourth visit at the local healthcare center could be abolished by connecting it digitally with your local medical doctor for minor diseases. I mean, it's very, very simple, and a technique that, I mean, connect me talking here now with the live streaming for those who may listen. Today, her company serves patients online through a secure video interaction, and since no visit to a hospital is needed, I mean, it's obviously a win-win solution for us, covering the budget of the healthcare sector, and for the patients not needing to go for minor diseases. Another one is Louise Frithiofsson, is a Swedish entrepreneur and CEO at the company focusing on online personal workouts. Both these entrepreneurs are innovative and have found ways in where new technology has enabled their business idea. And she's present in Sweden, Stockholm, and in the US. And we have an important role to play by removing obstacles in the internal market and by making sure that the legislation is congruent with the digital environment in order to enable more businesses from Louise and Josephine. And to unlock, as you said, Johnston, both men and female. 30% of the Swedish companies are today driven by women. I think we are among the top, but still means that 70% is run by men. So we haven't unlocked the potential of our own population. And that's why we've been also asking the Commission for the feedback and the statistics which should be gender separated between men and women, so that we as politicians can set targets and that we can follow up if we succeed or if we not succeed, especially on skills. So all this applies to be able to tap into the opportunities in the Internet of Things and machine-to-machine communication, which we provide. And let me conclude, because we're closing into lunch. I'm hungry. As Harald said, it's about the mindset. And it's so clear. And we have to work on that. And I think we've been lagging behind from the beginning. We have to admit that the US has been more entrepreneurial in their environment, in their ecosystem, than we've been in Sweden. Because we have enjoyed being employed rather than enjoyed starting a new company. I realized that when I was in university, and we make all these statistics, maybe I said it before in Brussels, but when it was 1 out of 10 who liked to start a new business in Sweden. And the figure in US was the opposite. It was 9 out of 10 who liked to start a business. Because in some way it's good, because it shows that we have good companies in EU and in Sweden where you like to be employed. So it's good conditions. But it's also, of course, say something about your personal aspirations while starting a company. So I think this is not easy to solve. It will take time, but we need the role models. We need you, angels, connecting with us and connecting with the society. We need a culture, and the environment around this is important to create the identity of the entrepreneurship. And I see things changing to the better. So I'm very positive. So thank you very much, Don.